Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Myth or Logic Radio. My name is Tom Murasso from BornToManifest.com, and today I'm honored to have as my guest Eldon Taylor. And Eldon is the host of the popular radio show Provocative Enlightenment. He is an award-winning New York Times best-selling author of over 300 books and audio and video programs. He is the inventor of the patented InnerTalk technology and the founder and president of Progressive Awareness Research, Incorporated, who has been featured as an expert in films, print, television, and radio. He has been called a master of the mind and has appeared as an expert witness on both hypnosis and subliminal communication. Eldon is an ordained interdenominational minister and counseled individuals within the prison system, hospice, and privately for years. More than 20 scientific studies have been conducted evaluating Eldon's technology and approach, all demonstrating its power and efficiency. Eldon is listed in more than a dozen Who's Who's publications, including Who's Who in Intellectuals and Who's Who in Science and Engineering. He is a fellow in the American Psychotherapy Association and an internationally sought-after speaker. His books and audio-video materials have been translated into more than a dozen languages and have sold millions worldwide. Welcome, Eldon.
Well, thank you very much, Tom. I tell you what, I don't know who sent you that intro, but I'm going to speak to him. I put my pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else.
Okay. Well, Eldon, you've been on the show a number of times. I think this is about your third or fourth time, and it's always a pleasure to have you with us. We all learn a lot from your insights into the mind and mind programming and all of that, and much of your work has been about mind programming. However, you've got a new book out that's called What If? The Challenge of Self-Realization. And it seems a little different than your typical mind programming books like that, the kind of stuff we're subjected to on a daily basis. And you also talk about conspiracy theories and now stuff like that out there. How does this new book fit in with your previous work?
Actually, it appears different, but it only appears different. The appearance is just, I guess what I'm trying to say, skin deep. My prior books have talked about how the world, for all intent and purposes, whether it's the people that have a political agenda to sell you, or the people that have a product or a service to sell you, or the people that want you to believe in a certain way, a religion, a philosophy, how the world is intent on owning our thoughts, and how some of this is, much more than organic. It isn't just a matter of our peers and our parents, and it isn't just a matter of, being raised with the idea of what I call a no-don't syndrome. You're not old enough, you're not smart enough, you're too fat, you're too skinny. All of that negative influence that we all undergo in our maturation process and that we all make adjustments to. And even if those adjustments are unconscious, we develop defense strategies that are designed to maximize our pleasure, minimize our pain, thereby gain greater acceptance and eliminate or minimize the amount of rejection we experience. We're all human beings, and that is, we are herd animals, and for all intent and purposes, that is biologically and organically a part of our maturation. That said, we also have all of this overt material that flies at us that today we just call neuromarketing. Neuromarketing meaning we're going to use the most sophisticated of devices, instruments, etc., to watch the brain lifetime while we present different stimulus. And in that process, we're going to, measure those reactions, and we're going to hone how we manipulate the unconscious. all of this was started by a man by the name of Edward Bernays, who was the nephew of Sigmund Freud, and Bernays also the author of the book Propaganda, in which he says it is the duty of the intellectual elite to program the public in such a way that you can herd an otherwise unherdable mass and orchestrate a cohesive society. Bernays, obviously, taking the work of Freud, said, if I can take Uncle Freud's material and learn to plumb the depths of the unconscious, I can motivate people to do what I want them to do because they think they want to do it. Well, today we call that not scientific marketing, but neural marketing. And we know that it's not just very sophisticated in terms of maybe employing functional magnetic resonance imaging, but by utilizing it, we get surprised with a lot of data. For instance, we know that if we show a smoker the Surgeon General's warning on a pack of cigarettes, that one of the reward centers in the brain, the nucleus accumbens, lights up, to use the words of MRI or PET technicians, meaning that it becomes excited. So, in other words, the smoker wants to smoke more. Well, that tells the tobacco company, let's make this warning larger, let's put it in more places. There does seem to be a risk factor that also drives people to consumption. It's easy to say, as some do, well, the reason you have drug commercials with all the contraindications at the end, taking this drug may cause this, including death, is because it's a law, but it also has a certain attraction, a certain sales power that accompanies it. Well, all of this is done to overtly manipulate us. And it's fair enough then to step back at a certain point and say, well, what was my last original thought? Or more appropriately even, who am I? Mm-hmm. What I tried to do with What If was move from here's what's being done, here's how it's being done, here's who's doing it, here's the smoking guns, These are the arguments they use to dissuade you from accepting this material as credible. Here is actually the evidence. Here's an ad. Here's a advertising agency. I tried to move from that and move from the notion that most of our choices they're given us. As I said earlier, we're choosing A, B, or C when indeed there's an entire alphabet. In fact, Krishnamurti said we choose only when we're confused. Therefore, choice is an illusion, because if we know clearly there's nothing to choose between. And in a very real sense, there is some horsepower to that when we translate it to the human condition. I wanted to move from that into a very real personal experience, Tom. Mm-hmm. You pick up the book and you start in What If, and the very first thing it's going to do is take you into thought experiments. And these thought experiments are designed for you to truly live these experiments. And as you do, what you discover is you don't know yourself. You really don't know yourself. So you have a lot of dissonance.
What I hear you saying is that everybody's pretty much running on automatic.
Absolutely. And that's very well said. I mean, behavioral science circles, we call that the adaptive unconscious. But the bottom line comes down to this. Most people are not aware that every single thought, every act that they carry out, etc., is given to them by the unconscious. Benjamin Libet's work back in the 50s demonstrated that. It's since been replicated many, many times with the most sophisticated of instrumentation. The programming that is in your unconscious is the script that you're living in your conscious. Kurt Vonnegut said, we are what we pretend to be. So we must be careful what we pretend. And here's the problem. If you think of it this way, and let's just go to the core of the issue, I'm going to digress a little bit here and maybe make a broad circle, but Mark Twain is given credit with popularizing the notion that the angels hid God within man. They appeared to have this conversation where they say, where will we hide God? Well, you're not at the bottom of the sea or out into space, because man is so clever and would find him. But if you put him inside man, well, man will never look there. Well, the last place man looks for anything, including himself, is within.
Mm-hmm.
So if you stop and you think, what if I was a caterpillar, and I could become a butterfly, but I'm unwilling to take the time to enter a chrysalis. I'm unwilling to really look at myself, to really reflect on who I am. So I'm just gonna continue to crawl along here like a caterpillar. In a very real sense, that's what lots of people do.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about how further fractured we get, I mean, the roles that we wear. I live in Spokane, Washington, and I have a little horse ranch up here. So I know that if I put on my cowboy hat and my boots and my chaps and I walk outside, I have to be very careful or I'll put on an entirely different demeanor.
Mm-hmm.
I have a good friend that is a psychologist, a radio talk show host, and she rides a Harley. And when she puts on her chaps and helmet, it's an entirely different personality.
Mm-hmm.
I think most people identify with that. We change how we dress, we change the context we're in, and we're a bit like chameleons. We change how we talk, we maybe change, the slang that we use, we change how we walk, we change a lot about ourselves. So if tomorrow you were to, for all intent and purposes, find yourself standing in front of a mirror, and you had no memory, you had complete amnesia, and you're looking at a person looking back at you, and they seem somewhat familiar, vaguely familiar. You're touching yourself, and you can see that it is you in the mirror. What is the most important thing you would have on your mind?
Who am I?
Who am I? Yeah, absolutely. You got it, Tom. You're the first person to answer that one, by the way. It is. I would be saying to myself, who am I? What am I doing here? I mean, what do I like? What do I believe? I mean, what is this thing called life? I would be truly, genuinely examining my thoughts, my feelings, all of it. Unfortunately, it may take amnesia for most people to stop and do that. I have always enjoyed the great works of philosophy. And Pythagoras is a famous philosopher, as well as a geometrist, known probably best for his geometry, Pythagorean theorem. But he was also a mystic, and he had a school. And the school became known as the Pythagorean Brotherhood. And it was a lot of people found it a highly sought-after objective to achieve entrance to this school. And there were certain criteria that were necessary, and among the criteria was you had to appear before the entire academy and tell them one thing you knew absolutely for certain. Just one thing. That's all you had to do, okay? You were given all the time you needed. You could go into the desert, you could meditate, you could spend all the time you wanted in discerning the one thing. But when you did appear in front of the entire academy, including, of course, Pythagoras, the academy on cue would begin to ridicule you. They would point out the logical fallacies, the inaccuracies, the error in your thinking. They would tease, joke, cajole, whatever was appropriate to dissuade you from what you believed. And if they were, able to do so, or able to completely discredit what it was that you said you believed, well, then admission to the academy was forbidden. So here's the question. You're about to appear before the academy. And what are you going to tell them is the one thing, that you believe? And many people say, well, I'm going to tell them there is a God. Well, maybe you are, but then they're going to go after you. What do you mean by a God? Is this a man that, sits on a throne? Is he all-powerful? If he's all-powerful, can he build a rock so large you can't lift it? How do you know this? You know this because you believe it? Have you seen him? Have you talked? So, in other words, we're looking for an epistemological certainty. We're not looking for faith. Soren Kierkegaard said if we know absolutely for certain whether there's a God or there isn't a God, then there's no purpose in faith. And if there's no purpose in faith, well, the context of the human condition completely changes, doesn't it? We can see the value to having faith. So what is it I'm going to say with an epistemological certainty? And, I puzzled over this for years, and finally concluded and wanted to, bring this all together in a experiential way that a person could for themselves experience. Who am I? And what I learned was this. I can unequivocally say I'm an experience, having an experience. So, I'm maybe not Eldon Taylor. If I survive death, and I believe we all will, I believe we're all eternal in that sense. I'm not going to be able to say I'm 6 foot tall. I live in Spokane, Washington, and I'm not going to take my diplomas or my certificates or my home or my things with me.
Right.
So who am I going to be? Well, I am an experience, and I am experiencing, and you are too. And all of a sudden that makes us a verb, not a noun. Huh. And when we change ourselves into the verb, everything changes in the context that we look at it. So what if the challenge of self-realization is all about, learning who you are by deciphering that which you believe through experiences that you have on a daily basis. And I don't think, we can be spiritual in this world or pragmatic by ignoring what's going on in our daily lives. And by that I mean, look, Japan and Libya, they're hot on the scene right now, and we should all have opinions about that. And our opinions should be based on something other than soundbite reasoning.
Right. Okay. So what if, which is, by the way, a great title for this book, because it contains a large number of thought experiments. First of all, why don't we let everybody know what you mean by a thought experiment, and maybe give us an example.
Sure. In science, we'll very often think about how we're going to run a study. And by thinking about it, I mean by literally imagining that we're doing it. And Einstein laid on the side of a hill, according to his own biography, and imagined himself to be a beam of light traveling into space. And as he traveled, he noticed the curvature of space. And, of course, he came back, and the curvature of space-time, it took him 20 years to reduce this all to what we today know as Einsteinian physics. So, what you do in a thought experiment is you literally envision the circumstances, the situation. If it has to be in science, and what you're doing maybe is a human subject study, you imagine how many subjects you're going to have, what it is that you're going to say to the subjects, what your pre is and your post test instruments are. You try to think as one of the subjects about any possible contraindication that may occur, something that may be threatening. In other words, you go through it mentally in your head in the most finite of detail in working out the experiment before you ever reduce it to paper or you ever conduct an actual experiment. Chemists do this, physicists do this, behavioral scientists do this, and every one of us can do this, and it can be remarkably revealing to us what we learn. There are 22, there's actually more, but there are 22 deep thought experiments in the new book, What If? The Challenge of Self-Realization. An example of that thought experiment is also, in my view, a fantastic example of what we find in cognitive dissonance. And this is where we hold two different views simultaneously, and we're unaware of it. In other words, we have two opposing beliefs, but we're unaware, and so, it can create some psychic tension. And what's new about that? I mean, everything that flies at us today is designed to heighten our arousal, build anxiety, because if we're not anxious, we're not insecure, and if we're not, in that stage, we don't need anything, and so we don't consume anything.
Right.
So, you can walk into a bookstore and there's a magazine rack, and you're not blonde enough, you're not thin enough, you're not, on the right diet, you're not, everything is all postured in that place in order to convince us that we should consume it. But set that aside. I want you to imagine in this thought experiment that you're a police officer. You're going to have to, actually put yourself in this role, and what I'm going to give you is a very abbreviated form of what you'd find in the book, but it nevertheless will be complete enough for you to get an example of what a thought experiment is. You're a police officer. You're responding to a domestic call. It's a strange call. The woman that called it in was really upset, overwrought. The information is incomplete as a result. You're not quite sure what you're going into. You do know most domestic calls have to do with a man and a woman fighting, but not always. And you knock on the door, and a woman opens the door, and it's an older woman, maybe grandmother type, and she is shaking visibly. Her entire body is throbbing with sobs, and she can't speak. She is so overwhelmed with sorrow and grief, and the tears are flowing down her cheek. The only thing she can do is, in a trembling motion, point with her entire arm and body toward a teenage girl inside a not too well lit living room, sitting on a chair with an ottoman in front of her. On the ottoman are the legs and the feet of the girl, but also what appears to be a newborn infant. I mean, you can see that it has blood on it, but the color's not right. So you rush in.
Mm-hmm.
And there you find the infant on the ottoman with a plastic sack tied over its head, strangulated. Colors are turning, the blues and the purples mixed with the blood that is drying on it, and it's a horrible sight. And the young girl with her feet on the ottoman next to this child seems to be undisturbed about it all. Just no big deal. Just, this is my form of birth control.
Mm.
Because she lives in a state where there is a law designed to protect midwives and doctors, physicians, from wrongful deaths because of stillborn infants. And that state says as long as the umbilical cord is connected, the child is not an independent life.
Mm-hmm.
So this young girl has decided she doesn't want a child, knows what the law is, has simply put a plastic sack over its head, pulled it tight, strangulated it, still attached the umbilical. No crime has been committed. Now let's further imagine, you're this law enforcement officer, male or female, it doesn't matter. You and your husband have been working very hard to have a child. You've been trying to do this for years. You've just started visiting a fertility clinic. You're not sure that you're really good candidates. You're even thinking about adopting. You're investigating all of that. And here's this beautiful newborn baby, suffocated on the ottoman. How do you feel? That's a rhetorical. Don't answer it. It's a thought experiment. But do wear it. How do I feel? What do I think? Is this law just? Should this girl be allowed to get away with this? Or is what she did okay? It's no big deal, How do you feel? Reach down inside and get your belief. And while you have that, and you hang on to it for a minute, and again, this is a very short, a very brief visit to a thought experiment, but let's zip out to California. It's just one such state where there are double homicide laws. realize that if you're in the state of California and you were to turn the corner too quickly and hit and kill a pregnant woman, well, let's say she was only 3 weeks pregnant. She's just walking out of the doctor's office. He has just confirmed that she's pregnant. She wanted to see him instead of take one of these take-it-home drug tests, pregnancy tests. And so she's 3 weeks pregnant. You turn the corner too quickly, or someone you know turns the corner too quickly, they hit and kill her.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have a double homicide. You killed a woman and you killed her unborn child. Most people would say, well, that's how the law ought to be, especially if you think about killers that do indeed kill pregnant women, 5, 6, 7 months old. Or, there have been some famous cases out of California where pregnant women were killed by their husbands in this way. So then you say, well, this double homicide law is a good law. Then you're likely to say that. But if you realize that this woman that's only pregnant by 3 months or 3 weeks is a double homicide, then how do you justify the fact that she could have a late-term abortion in the 8th month of a pregnancy legally in the state of California? Now, I'm not making any judgment on abortion. This is not an issue about, the so-called pro-life or the so-called, pro-choice. Those are red herrings. This is an issue about life. What constitutes life?
Mm-hmm.
Is the life in the woman one that if somebody other than her takes is not a life? But if she takes, I said that backwards. If someone other than her takes the life, it's a life, should be protected. They go to prison. They go to the death chamber. But if she takes, it's okay.
Yeah.
What happens is we are dissonant about this. Our society is dissonant about it because we're not looking at what the real issue is. And that is not about pro-choice, not about pro-life, but about what constitutes a life and when is it sacred to be protected, if ever.
Mm-hmm.
Under what circumstances? That's the issue that should be on the table. We reason from sound bites, and so we don't reason that way at all. Indeed, I was amused just this last week because in the morning I will catch the news while I'm preparing to leave, and because I spend a lot of time looking at things like, words that work and mind programming and how media does things and so on and so forth. That's one of my areas of expertise. I'll change stations and get both sides of the story. And on this particular morning, Tom, on one station, I'll leave the stations anonymous. Your listeners, I'm sure, can figure it out. But on one station, they're taking a poll. And the poll that they're taking is about a question. The question goes like this, paraphrased. Why should poor taxpayers, or should I should say, poor taxpayers, be asked to reimburse the rich from taxpayer money for putting their children in private schools? Okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's the soundbite on one station. I changed the channel. Going on another station is the same survey, said differently. On the other channel, it is, should poor taxpayers, remember we have poor taxpayers, both of these, should poor taxpayers be paying twice for their child's education because our public education system is such a failure? And these poor taxpayers understand many of them are working 2 jobs and sacrificing much in their lives just to help their children get to a decent school and put them into private schools. We have the same question here. The question is about school vouchers. Should there be school vouchers? But on one, obviously, poor taxpayers shouldn't be reimbursing the rich. I'm against that. And if that's the soundbite I go away with, that's the position I argue from. If, on the other hand, I identify with that poor taxpayer trying to get his child ahead, working a second job to put him in this well, then I am pro. It is how the entire thing was stated, you know, and these sound bites are how we reason. We don't take the time to look at what is the issue behind school vouchers, where would this money go or come from, who would be the primary recipients of it, would this advance our educational system overall? I mean, we are behind as a nation. We're getting further behind every day. It's embarrassing. I mean, we don't look at that. What we look at is the soundbite.
Mm-hmm.
I heard another piece that I think is really worth looking at, Tom, just a couple of weeks ago, and that has to do with definitions. You know, Janet Napolitano called back our national security domestic extremism dictionary a little over, I guess, a year and a half or so ago. But that dictionary was published on behest of our current administration, and the dictionary went to all of the law enforcement agencies in the country because it's designed to red flag those individuals who are considered to be a risk, a terrorist risk, so law enforcement will pay close attention to them. Now, we all know that we have a liberal administration, and we know that whether we're liberal or we're conservative, and this is not a judgment on the administration again. When this dictionary came out, it marginalized all the conservatives by saying, well, let's see, one of the people we should be paying close attention to would be returning vets from Afghanistan and Iraq. Another would be those right-to-lifers. Another would be, those NRA members, those, Second Amendment supporters. So in other words, what we had done, or what had happened, was this dictionary had placed over on the other side, in the radical area, all of those, conservative issues. Now, because they had included vets from Afghanistan and Iraq, it was immediately recalled. I mean, there was such an outcry about it that Napolitano pulled it back and said, golly, this was a mistake. I don't know how these things got into here. Gosh, we're sorry. But like in a court of law, once that gets in some people's minds, they don't hear the retraction.
Right.
They hear the statement. So, I heard, the great campaign is we want to remove the word illegal and replace it with undocumented where aliens are concerned. Because this whole matter of illegal just colorizes it all. Well, the commentator came back and said, okay, well, why not call a rapist a non-consensual sex partner? And you see, that's the power of definitions, framing an argument, and that's how our soundbite reasoning continues, and that's another step in how we get dissonant, or become dissonant, and in that sense, another step further away from our authentic self. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And we're going to get back to that authentic self before we're done here, because that's a big part of this, isn't it?
It is.
In fact, I was going to say, how do you see spirituality fitting into this whole thing?
Well, what I see there is there's been a historical bifurcation for many years, and without pointing in any direction, I'm just going to put the dichotomy on the table and let you decide how far back it goes and where it is to blame. But it essentially states this: our spiritual life is our spiritual life, and our real life is our real life. So, I can go to church, as a friend of mine says, on Sunday, and I can eat my saints, and on Monday I can shit my devils. Forgive the vernacular, but the bottom line is I have an acquaintance who is a minister, and on Sunday in his church, you would believe that he's Mother Teresa's brother. He's a very pious, very very spiritual person. But on Monday, if you engage him about politics, he is absolutely horrible to be around. He is vulgar, opinionated. It's unbelievable to think that this is the same person.
Right.
But to him, they're different issues. They're divorced. Well, I happen to believe that we're in this life because we're here to learn something. And in our learning process, we're going to go through different experiences. And those experiences are going to include, what's going on in the world around us. It's going to include us coming to decisions about what would we do if we were that policeman? What would we do if we had the power to change that legislation and or to see it was universal legislation everywhere in the world? What would we do if we found a 14-year-old girl whose nose and ears had been cut off by her husband because she didn't please him? I mean, he'd purchased her, and if we discovered that she crawled home to her mother and father only for them to deny her entrance to the home, and that some strangers had eventually picked her up. I mean, this is a true case, a true scenario, just as the one about the baby is absolutely true. That wasn't made up. Mm-hmm. That's what everybody needs to understand, that these thought experiments are based on facts that have really happened in our country, and recently, not 10 years, 20 years ago, but recently. These are issues we live with today. How you think you can be spiritual and turn your back on those issues is beyond me. The head in the sand metaphor is inadequate, in my view, for that kind of spirituality. You are an agent of action, and even inaction is action. Mm-hmm. If I say nothing, if I do nothing, as John Locke said, I've lent tacit consent to it. So it's okay. If I don't call out, if I don't, express my disgust or my displeasure, or for that matter, my sincere support, I'm failing as a spiritual being, because I don't believe that we can look at ourselves and say, look, the spiritual side of us is my blood vessels. The spiritual side of me is my cranium. The spiritual side of me is the soles of my feet. When we look at spiritual, we're not thinking of the body. We're thinking about something more, something quintessential, maybe consciousness, soul, spirit. Those terms all come to people's mind. And I called that experience earlier. Our experience is for sure who we are and what we'll take with us. And turning our back on the real world and or engaging in the real world in a nasty, vicious way, that doesn't manifest our spiritual enlightenment in any way, shape, or form, at least in my opinion. Mm. So, to me, the integration of who I am in this given world, the way I live, the walk I walk, not just the talk, but the walk, the fruit, as has been said, you will know them by their fruits. What it is that I do 7 days a week, 24/7, what I stand for, what I represent, how I take responsibility for myself and the world around me to the best of my ability, that all, in the end, is a part of the equation that on one side of the equal sign will determine what the outcome on the other side of the equal sign might be. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense, Tom?
Yeah. I'm thinking, we're human beings, not human believings. So,
right. Well said.
Original thought, that was, you could have called the book that. And the book is called What If? The Challenge of Self-Realization all sorts of thought experiments, and ladies and gentlemen, you will do a lot of thinking reading this book. Now, Eldon, you're running some kind of a special online, a launch party. Can you tell the folks what's going on with that and how they can
Sure.
join in on it?
Sure, and I'd love to, Tom, and thank you for assisting and helping us with it. If you go to my website, eldontaylor.com, ELDONTAYLOR.com, you'll find a banner right near the top with a picture of the book, What If? And if you click on that, it'll take you to a special launch party. And we call it a launch party for this reason. I mean, first of all, the book officially releases tomorrow on the 29th. And it's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books and all your brick-and-mortar bookstores. But our official party goes this way. There are over 100 leading authors and luminaries like Tom that are participating in the launch party by assisting us in telling everybody about it and in providing free gifts to you just to get this book. There are, e-books that are downloadable free. There's a lot of audio programs that are downloadable free. And then we have a number of drawings in addition. There are many other free programs, but we have a number of drawings. You can win a trip to the ICANN conference in Pasadena, California. That's airfare for two, tickets to the 3-day, 4-day event, hotel, meals, etc., all free. You can win a new Kindle. A number of drawings have come along also. So the whole idea is this. Everyone's supporting this campaign. And there are some real, like I say, who's who people, including Tom, want you to have this book. They want you to have the book, so they're offering these gifts, the awards, etc. I want you to have the book too, so I'm doing more of the same. You're not going to be buying the book from me. The book is released now, new and hardback, and I believe I checked earlier today. Amazon's price was under $13 for it on sale. It's a $20 book new. You're going to buy the book from an Amazon, a Barnes & Noble. You're going to come back with your receipt, and we're, from that receipt number, going to be able to give you all these free gifts. And that's what makes it a party. You get a great book, and I mean that sincerely. I think it is my best. And it is a life changer, and you get all of these extras as well, and the whole thing is maybe a $13 expenditure.
Yeah, definitely well worth it, folks, and get another copy for a gift. And let me remind the folks that this show will be broadcast on March 29th, so the book is available today as you're listening to the show. And Eldon, thanks so much for coming back. We love having you here, and hope to see you real soon, and good luck with the book.
Oh, thank you, sir, and it's indeed my pleasure. I love your work, I love what you do, and I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to share with you.
All righty. Hey, folks, you're listening to Mythologic Radio. My name's Tom Murasso from BornToManifest.com. We'll see you next time. Peace out, and we love you.